Hi everyone, this is Paul here for the Magdalene Centre. Today I want to talk about the astrology for October, including a few key dates and the events happening on those days, along with the general themes outlined for this month based on the movements of the planets and what we can potentially learn from them and implement in our lives. So in terms of the key dates, the first one is the 5th of October. This is the full moon in Aries, and this is the harvest moon, represents the reaping of what was sown back at the spring equinox. The next date is the 10th of October. This is when Jupiter moves out of Libra, having been there for 13 months, and starts a new passage through Scorpio, bringing a major change of theme in terms of where it can need to operate or learn greater wisdom and understanding. The third date is the 19th of October. This is the new moon in Libra. This is an opportunity to set new intentions in areas related to Libra. And finally, on the 23rd of October, the Sun moves into Scorpio, marking a major change in collective theme that we then need to learn over the course of a month. So, at the start of this month, the Sun is in Libra. There's already a video online about that, but I'll go over it very briefly. So, the Sun in Libra is all about bringing balance to things. So, at this time, or when Sun first moves into Libra, it's at the autumn equinox, where light and dark are in balance with one another, they're equal, so day and night are the same length. And this is symbolic of what Libra is about. We need to bring awareness to our own shadow side and bring it up into balance with the light. Because if we continue to project our own shadow side onto other people, there's only so much growth we can do, because we'll only be operating at half capacity. If we do not focus on acknowledging our own shadow sides and bringing it into balance with our light and accepting it's there rather than trying to project it onto others, then true transformation can never really take place, because without bringing awareness to our own shadow first, the shadow side will always have power to sabotage our own actions, sabotage our own goals. And if we just keep using the blame game and projecting the issues onto other people rather than taking responsibility for ourselves and figuring out, okay, what is this incident trying to tell me? Why am I feeling triggered by this other person? What are they mirroring back to me that I need to deal with? Because for whatever reason, this part of myself I don't like, I'm not happy with it, and I'd rather project onto other people rather than face it. Because learning to face that side of ourselves is the first step, and if we can face it, acknowledge it, and recognise where we engage in shadow behaviours, because at the end of the day, shadows is the unhealed parts of ourselves. It's the parts that we've rejected over the years for whatever reason and kept them buried out of sight, and then because they're unconscious, we end up projecting them onto other people. But really what we need to do is turn that back around and ask how we engage in these behaviours and how can we transform them. Sun in Libra is also harvest time, so at the start of the astrological year, the Sun is in Aries, so this is planting the seeds, so new intentions, brand new actions, and brand new causes. Now that the Sun's in Libra, the opposite sign to Aries, we're seeing the end results. So it's a case of what was sown at Aries, we're now reaping in Libra. So if we've done our best to do things honestly, do things with love, and do things aligned with divine laws that drive everything, there's a good chance that we'll be harvesting a lot of good things right now. We're harvesting the fruits of our own endeavours, and this can then be used to sustain us or continue to motivate us to keep taking those actions because they're yielding fruits. Alternatively, if for whatever reason we haven't been doing things properly, or we've not tried to maintain alignment with the natural laws, the natural order of things, then we may well be finding projects that not necessarily fail, but they just haven't worked very well because it's been a constant struggle. Because if we try to do things against natural law, against natural order, then we will encounter problems. And this was from here, if we can change, because with Libra we're seeing the effects of our actions. If we can see the effects and trace it back to an action, if it's causing negative effects, we can then change the action and then that will bring about a better result in the long run if we're doing the action with wisdom. But if we're already doing things with wisdom, chances are we'll be harvesting a lot of fruits of our endeavours now. And this brings me nicely to the full moon in Aries. The full moon in Aries is the culmination of the intentions we set at the new moon in Aries, which was back on the 28th of March, shortly after the spring equinox. And this is right by middle of harvest time. So whatever we sowed back then when we set brand new intentions for the new astrological year, now we're seeing the end results of them. So it's a time to reflect how well have the actions and intentions for new beginnings manifested. What kind of effects are we seeing as a net result of those actions? Have we kept or maintained that Aryan drive to keep taking the action necessary to maintain things and have the courage to constantly renew things? And it's also, with Aries, it's about the sense of self-identity. So have we experienced a change in our sense of identity that's more in line with our authentic self, or are we still operating through masks and not staying true to ourselves? And it's also about looking at the balance between self and other. So this is between, I'll go into more detail in a separate video, but basically Aries and Libra is the balance between self and other. We need to have a strong sense of self so we don't lose touch with who we are, but at the same time we need to have consideration for other people in relationships. We're not the only one. We may be the centre of our own personal universe, but we're not the centre of the universe. We're all parts of a collective whole, and working together, this whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So with this full moon, it's an opportunity to look at, can we operate healthily in relationships without losing sense of or cut touch with our core self, and can we be considerate yet still be assertive for our own needs so we don't become a doormat and get walked over. Now the next thing I mentioned was Jupiter moving into Scorpio. So again, there'll be another video on this later on, but Jupiter in Scorpio is the next progression of wisdom from Libra. Ideally, in the past 13 months when Jupiter's been transiting Libra, what we should have been doing is looking at how can we work in cooperation with one another, and how can we learn the wisdom of balancing the opposites within us. Because for every part of ourselves that we consciously accept, there's another side to that which more often than not we project initially until we have the courage to look at it, evaluate it consciously and think, okay, what is this showing me? What parts of myself have I not made peace with? Because Libra is about bringing inner peace through balance. And with Jupiter and Libra, it was all about bringing balance between the darkness and the light within us. Because when we have that balance and we hold it in paradox, so we hold two opposing truths without trying to project one as wrong and the other as right, then we stand a chance of setting for Jupiter in Scorpio. And Jupiter in Scorpio is the power of alchemy. And by this I'm talking about Jupiter takes the two parts of the polarity, the light and the dark, and it puts it through a polarization process to help us see the positive end of it and refine it and show where the negative pole is. And ideally what we would do is purge the negative parts of ourselves from the psyche. Scorpio contains the residual attachments that the ego maintains, so subconscious emotional patterns, old emotional reactions to things which are usually completely inappropriate for what's happening now, but we still hold on to them. And one of the challenges of Scorpio is to purge all that dross from the psyche, let go of all those emotional attachments that the ego uses to maintain its dominion, and have the courage to rise over or transcend the power games that the ego engages with, and embrace the power of the phoenix, which is having the courage to separate the desires out and burn away the egoic desires which keep us operating from the shadow self, rather than acknowledging that core primal cosmic energy that's within every single one of us, and it lies within the realm of the soul, but can only be tapped into if we do that inner alchemy. And one of the most powerful forms of spiritual alchemy we can do, and it's a topic that not many people are too comfortable with because of popular conception or misperceptions. This alchemical act is forgiveness, because with forgiveness it's having the courage to accept what has happened in the past, accept that we cannot change it, but also have the courage to say, I'm not prepared to hold on to this anymore, I'm not going to keep this weight attached, I'm going to let go of it and accept that I may never get an apology from the person who I perceive to have wronged me, but that's okay. It's not, whatever happened is not worth the suffering it causes. I have the choice to let it go, and that's what I'm going to do, so that I can embrace that inner power rather than using egoic manipulation to try and control other people in order to protect ourselves behind masks. Jupiter also housed at Scorpio is about making the unconscious conscious, and with Jupiter here, the chances or the avenues for expansion, greater wisdom and greater self-understanding is through exploring our own unconscious minds, exploring the old attachments that we may not even realise are there, to go deep into the darkest recesses of the mind and shed a light there, and whatever does not belong with us anymore, does not belong within the realms of our mind, we need to let go of it. So this is Jupiter in Scorpio. As I said, there'll be another video later on all about this. The next date I mentioned was the 19th of October. This is the new moon in Libra. So with the new moon in Libra, this is an opportunity to set new intentions in areas ruled by Libra. So this is things like developing relationships, creating internal balance within us, because if we have inner balance and inner peace, that can then permeate outwards into the world around us, because if we create it on the inside first, it can then manifest on the outside. If we try to create it on the outside, it relies on egoic will and constantly trying to please other people to maintain that Libran balance. And the more we do that, the more we lose touch with ourselves, because we're trying to people please and we're not being true to who we are, and true balance cannot occur. If we decide to set an intention to create balance on the inside and make peace with ourselves, that inner peace and inner love can then flow outwards and create harmony in the environment around us. We may sort of look at areas like communication, and do we need to adjust the way we communicate with others and bring in tact, which is another element of Libra. So can we use social grace and tactfulness in our communication, or learn to develop that, so that we can communicate truth to other people in a way that is not going to come across as harsh and derogatory, and may well make it easy for the other person to accept it. It's also the time of looking at teamwork and cooperation. So if we've always tried to go things alone, do we want to now learn how to operate as a team? So it's not all about me, myself and I. Look at how can we work with other people to achieve a goal which is not possible for one person alone to achieve. So when we can work in true balance, cooperation and harmony, the amount we can achieve is far greater, because you've got more than one person dealing with the situation. And if two people are working in a spirit of cooperation, a spirit of harmony, and they're both working with equal desire towards the same goal, then so much more can be achieved through that act of teamwork and team efforts than can be done with one person alone. It may also be a time of looking at diplomacy. So how can we be more careful of what we're saying, or how can we, instead of looking to fight issues out, how can we sit down around the table and speak to people who we may have disagreements with, but we could potentially try and reach a compromise, or come to some kind of peace agreement, rather than trying to fight it out, say my way or the highway. So Libra is a time of a great rebalancing, and a time to look at how can we create more harmony in our lives, how can we create equality in relationships, so it's no longer the uneven relationships that Virgo bring, because Virgo is more about service. Libra is about transforming that to equality, so two people who are they're each other's equals, neither needs to dominate the other, they're both happy to be themselves but work in harmony with one another. The last thing I mentioned was the Sun moving into Scorpio. So with Jupiter already there, the Sun moving into Scorpio emphasises the Scorpio themes even more. Now, with Scorpio, we can actually see that, or the manifestations of Scorpio in nature, at least in temperate climates where we have woodland or trees which shed their leaves in winter. Because Scorpio, more than any other sign, has the power to release what is no longer necessary in our lives, so that what is left behind is only what is truly who we are. If you think about what a tree does in autumn, it's reached the point where the leaves are no longer required. There's no point holding on to them, because that's just going to require more energy than the tree when the tree needs to be conserving it. So what does it do? It withdraws the life force away from what is no longer required, and the leaves turn, like the Scorpio's fire of the phoenix, the leaves will turn yellow, gold and fiery colours, and then they just drop to the ground, and all that drops then creates fertile new ground for new growth in the future. Because what we liberate from the psyche, it isn't destroyed, but it can become fuel for the elevation of our own consciousness. So with Scorpio, we're looking at how can we liberate our own energy, liberate parts of our own mind that are trapped in old emotional patterns and thought patterns, and how can we use the fire of transformation to undergo that phoenix-like rebirth in order to release all of that energy that keeps us feeling tired, because we haven't used a lot of energy to keep old emotional stuff down. How can we face it and use that transformational energy to liberate that energy so that we can use it for constructive uses, and ideally realise the wisdom that true power is used for the greater good. It's not about elevating ourselves, it's not about making ourselves better than everyone else at other people's expense. When we're in touch with that true power that lies at the core of our being, that lies underneath all those emotional attachments and all those negative conditionings, and that we have to, through the power of forgiveness, transmute those patterns and release them from the psyche. If we can do that, then we can understand our true power, and that power is within us, it's within the realms of the soul, not the ego. And when we radiate this power outwards from the core of our being, we don't feel any need to try and control other people anymore. We don't need to equate control with power. We realise that control is just an illusion that the ego uses to maintain its dominion. But if we can overcome that through forgiveness and self-transformation and burning away of the old egoic connections, we can then radiate that cosmic force through us for the benefit of everyone around us. People may not understand it, but if we realise that that cosmic force is not there for our own personal use, it is there for us to help elevate humanity as a whole. But we have to do that work of transforming the darkness within us into light. Scorpio, more than any other sign, or arguably more than any other sign, has the power to shift the balance between the darkness and the light. But it all depends on whether we have the courage to go through that alchemical transformation of turning the unconscious dark sides of the mind into light through that transmutation, through forgiveness, and through immense self-love. Then we can shift the balance away from darkness and towards the light. Or alternatively, we have the choice to maintain the egoic attachments, to keep seeing ourselves as victims because we get a kick out of it, but we will never grow properly, and we will never know true freedom and true understanding and true wisdom if we operate from this place. So that's the choice that we face. So to recap, October starts off with bringing balance to the mind and balance to our life as a result, and it finishes with the power of transformation, of letting go of the old and purging it out of our psyches so that we can embrace our authentic self and shine that authentic self for the benefit of the world, not just for our own egos or for our own sense of self. I hope this useful guide for October. It's quite a lot to take on board, but there'll be other videos coming out later on that go into the specifics of the other patterns that I've mentioned during this report. But I hope it's useful for you. May this month bring you many valuable lessons, may it be much growth, and may you come out the other end with a greater joy and greater contentment in life.